This episode is brought to you by Amazon Business. How can you free up your team from time-consuming office tasks? Amazon Business empowers leaders to not only streamline purchasing, but better support their teams so they can focus on strategy and growth. Free up your teams and focus on your future. Learn more about the technology, insights, and support available at amazonbusiness.com.
Every journey I take leaves a lasting impact. Traveling the world only makes me realize just how much more there is to explore.
No one builds a legacy by standing still. Start your journey at remova.com.
A lot of in getting these kinds of big bid interviews, there is serendipity. Luck is very much involved because there has to be like a play of all of these different factors that came together. And I think that the film portrayed that really well, how everything kind of just conspired to make this thing happen.
I don't think it really gives that much away. And I think in my mind, I'm kind of comparing it to something like She Said, which is like a real kind of in-depth film into investigative journalism.
Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Flixwatcher podcast. Today I'm joined by Ninna Makrinov.
Hello.
Nina Robinson.
Great to be here.
And Helen.
Hello.
And we're going to be talking about Scoop. Thank you as always to the mighty people for their mighty tunes, and thanks to Ben from Rocket Audio and the team there for editing this podcast. Please do remember to head over to Spotify and give us a rating. Head over to Apple Podcasts, give us a rating. Head over to Pocket Cast, give us a rating there. Just copy the same review and leave it all a few places. Join the conversation with us on Twitter at FlixWatcherPod and all the other social media platforms. That's Threads, that's Blue Sky, that's Instagram at FlixWatcher. We are kind of on TikTok, but we don't know what our handle is. But if you type in FlixWatcher, you'll find us.
Hello film fans, welcome to this episode of Flixwatcher podcast. Our guests today are Nina and Nina. Over to you please, Ninna Makrinov, to say hello to our listeners and tell them a little bit more about who you are and what you do, please.
So, hello everyone. I have loads of personas, but I'm here today as a podcaster. I have a podcast called The Fat Psychologist. Obviously a psychologist, and I am fat. And my podcast is all about thinking and decoding well-being research from my perspective as a fat person. I have guests coming in and talking about mostly mental health, but then we sometimes explore other bits and pieces.
How do you explore the mental health side of things? How does that work in your show?
So I'm a researcher myself, so I look at published research, recent published research, and personal stories, and I look at the links between that, and I explore what we believe about well-being and does it hold in terms of evidence. So, for example, the belief that being fat is really unhealthy and horrible doesn't really hold with evidence necessarily. So that's one of the things that you would hear if you listen to my podcast.
Perfect. And that's The Fat Psychologist.
That is.
Ninna Robinson, who are you?
My background is the audio industry. So I worked as a journalist and documentary maker for the BBC World Service for about 15 years. So I travelled the world making documentaries, won a couple of awards along the way, including a prestigious Peabody Award and a Foreign Press Association prize. That was for a doc I made from Southside Chicago on the dogfighting scene.
Wow.
So I've seen a lot of the world, and I left the organisation in December of 2020 and I set up a media production company. It's called Soundtruism. So I make factual narrative podcasts, and I also run a podcast festival, which is called Uni Podfest, and it happens all in Birmingham.
Lovely. And that's where I met you guys a few weeks ago as we record this.
That's right.
So, Ninna Robinson, you've chosen today for us to talk about Scoop. Can you tell us, first of all, the fact you did some journalism and you would travel all around the world, that kind of gives me some insight potentially, but let us know from your own words. Why did you choose Scoop? And then I'll give you 60 seconds in which to give the synopsis.
Yeah, exactly. So I just thought I should choose a film that kind of lends itself to me offering some insight other than just a casual viewer. And there are so much kind of angles to go down in this. It basically is an insight into the inner workings of the BBC in journalism, how you get big interviews. And so there were loads of interesting avenues that I thought I could explore with this film. So that's why.
Perfect. Okay. Your 60 second synopsis timer starts now.
Scoop is a film that is about that interview, the Prince Andrew interview, which you should all kind of remember as the one where he is talking about his friendship with the sex offender, sex trafficker, all-round creepy paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. And the interview was conducted by BBC Newsnight, which is basically all about how the interview's producer, Sam McAlister, got that interview.
Yeah, perfect.
Very succinct.
So, Ninna Makrinov, were you in the UK when this interview happened, the real interview?
Oh, yeah, I was. I'm originally from Chile. I've lived in Mexico as well, but I was in the UK when this happened. It was a big thing, wasn't it? I don't think we would have missed it even if I was in Mexico.
It was truly global.
So how do you measure that as a journalist? Because I've got infinite questions for you related to this, which might extend the length of this particular episode. But I'd imagine it had big sway in the US and a big sway in the UK. But then it's like you're part of the BBC World Service, which then is super prestigious.
And also, I don't think you can underestimate the influence and reach of the royal family around the world. I mean, I was based in Jamaica in the Caribbean for a couple of years as a foreign correspondent, and the amount of love and, just general, I mean, I went to Montserrat where it's, the royal family is still the head of state. I mean, it's almost kind of ossified in its kind of thoughts and opinions. I mean, that is changing. So there's a movement now in Jamaica to kind of remove the royal family and links to the royal family, but incredible kind of love for this institution still exists in large parts of the Caribbean and other parts of the world.
When I was living in Norway for a bit, and they've got no ties to the UK apart from being quite close, and when Prince William and Kate's royal wedding, like half the country left Norway to come to the UK, and I was like, why are you doing that?
It's just like the novelty of it, isn't it? Because we are probably the only country that's stupid enough to still have monarchy.
Norway's got monarchy, so is Spain, so is like Netherlands.
Yeah, there's others. But I think it's not just the novelty. It's like there's this imagination that it's like the princess persona and all of these things. Because again, I was born in Chile and I grew up there until I was like 25. And even then, it's like we were following the monarchy all the time. And I was even given a book about Princess Diana. I couldn't care less.
That's so bizarre.
It's so bizarre.
Well, this is why it's so good that this film kind of like punctures a big hole. If anybody who didn't know about that interview, it's like they played the interview, most of it in full. So it was a real kind of like just jaw-dropping kind of interview. After I watched the film, I watched the real interview with Prince Andrew. And actually, the real interview was even more jaw-droppingly awful, like in its kind of like, how can this guy be so totally oblivious to reality? Like, obviously, who is going to believe you that you were referring to the fact that you couldn't have been going clubbing because you were in a fucking Pizza Express in Woking, or that you couldn't sweat because you have some crazy condition? And it's just like, do you really think that all of the people that are listening to this cannot see what a bullshitter you are? It's like, he must, but I think it's like the level of contempt and that he must have for everybody else to think that they're not going to question him, so that's just unbelievable.
Must be nice to be a white male with that kind of privilege and belief, mustn't it?
It really did come across in the interview. But that was really just a small segment of the film. I mean, it did culminate in that, but most of the film is not about that. It's all kind of like the build up. It's all about kind of the inner workings of that program. I mean, I'm mainly at the World Service, but I've done stints in TV as well, TV news programs. So it was, some of it rang true, some of it didn't, but I really enjoyed watching the kind of the character of Sam McAlister. So Sam McAlister actually wrote a book first about her experiences of getting that interview, and then it got optioned into the Netflix film. And I did actually meet Sam when I was at the BBC. She was also there. We were kind of paths crossed. I didn't know her well, but she gave a kind of a talk to our department about how to get those big interviews and just the kind of skill set that you need to kind of do a job like that, which is a really different level of skill. And there's another friend of mine as well. It was her job as well. Her job title was the Big Bids producer. So she just spent her whole time. She had like 3 phones on the go with her, like 24 hours, and was just constantly like, just had all these balls, juggling all these balls, trying to make sure that everybody was trying to get these huge interviews and talking to all their PR people, and crazy.
I mean, to me, it was again the same. The Sam's character in particular, but all the amazing women on the BBC. Which again, I suppose there's not as many women as there seem to be when you watch only this movie. But this working class, potentially single mom, and I was a solo mom myself, so there's a lot of discrimination in that sense. That then has the guts to actually challenge royalty. I thought it was amazing.
Yeah. I really love that because I identified with that as well, because a lot of the time when I was working at the BBC, I was also a single mother to a boy around the same age as the Sam McAlister's son. So I was really able to identify with, you know, being on the bus, going home late, you know, all of that kind of, it kind of really sent me back in time to how it is, because you're kind of like doing all these incredible things at work, like, because you don't know where you're going to end up. You might end up at the palace. Like one time I ended up outside the North Korean embassy and somebody calling me up in the small house saying, oh, we can give you a visa for North Korea. You know, like you don't know where that job is going to take you, you know, but then you're kind of like back home with the back to the ground when you're just on the bus coming home, and then it's just the drudgery of real life, you know.
Well, thank goodness for the night buses to bring you back home safely. So what, I mean, like I said, I've got a mountain of questions to ask you, but one thing we have to kind of ask, because it is somewhat a true to life story, is how important, we don't seem to have that many of these super big scoop interviews now, do we? Because I remember like the Bashir and Michael Jackson one being a huge thing. I remember Princess Diana interviews, but there seemed few and far between then anyway, and less now. Why do you think that is? Is that true? Or is that a true kind of statement?
Well, I mean, they touch on the reasons for that in the film.
Cuts to funding, sacking staff, cutting away at budgets, not having the teams. I
was thinking about like the interest in that, because now social media is so prevalent, you can see a lot of these stories without the interview, and then...
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, Nina, what do you think about that? But I think that's a big point in terms of people are being more vocal now, where many people then would have been very careful of going on social media or being seen by the news. So getting that access was harder. But now the approach seems to be, we all want to be out there, don't we? And getting our voices heard for podcasting.
Yeah, podcasting, that's where all the big interviews now.
Well, exactly. So technology has moved on. The media platforms have moved on. Where the reliance was on the big names, on the huge legacy media corporations, that kind of contract has been broken in a way. They don't need them as much as they probably did in the past. I mean, you've got, you know, say Cristiano Ronaldo, like the huge footballers with like, you know, 650 million followers. I mean, why the hell would he want to do an interview for the BBC? And I think that a lot of celebrity stars, they've become so big that they're almost untouchable, that they have such an army of people around them that it was almost an impenetrable layer to try and get to them to do that interview. Whereas I think in the past, because I remember I'd done quite a lot of work in India from the Delhi Bureau, so I know I met somebody who worked on the Mumbai Mirror newspaper, and she was telling me how in the past they used to be able to just access those Bollywood stars, when Amitabh Bachchan in his heyday, Anil Kapoor, they could just know where they were going to be, know where their house was or whatever, and be able to just get an interview with them. And she was like, that you must be joking if they were able to do anything like that anymore. It's just... There's a lot of distrust, why should they trust the media when they can just go unfiltered and say what they want to say directly to their audiences? And why face uncomfortable questions or questions that they don't need the platform because they've got their own audience.
Can I ask something? I was also really interested, Ninna, on the role of the advisors to Andrew or Prince Andrew in kind of managing the media and how out of touch they were as well.
I know. I love that character. So there's a woman who treats Prince Andrew like he's one of the family. So she must have this position maybe as like private secretary, somebody who's very high up in his administrative office, basically. Now, I actually know somebody who does that kind of job. And so I know the kind of personality that you have to be in that kind of circle. And it is that you have to almost they're your family, you love them, you just want the best for them. I think that character was really brilliant. I loved the way that the actress played that character because she was just trying to do her best. She wanted to help Andrew. That's why she kind of set up the interview with BBC Newsnight programme, because she just wanted to help him not be the Randy Andy, negative kind of connotation that the public just hate him for that. Not hate him, but just he's so low down on people's estimation. And she was just wanted to help him, and for her, she was just kept saying, people need to see you, the real you, as if for her, his character was lovely guy, like an uncle, he might say the wrong thing sometimes, but actually he's our harmless old uncle,
She's almost too close to actually see what every other person saw. One thing I see more and more nowadays as, I guess, people get cancelled. I don't really want to go down that route, but when people have been picked up for these things, there tends to have been an undercurrent of these things happening. To the extent with Noel Clarke, for example, I had friends who work in film and TV, and they were always like, that guy's a dickhead. And then when it happened and it transpired, even though there hadn't been anything public in the news, the fact that I knew that, I was like, okay, if I knew that, then lots of other people know that these things are going on. But then you still have those sycophants next to him in Prince Andrew, where the people are super close or super shielded from what is blatant truth to anyone else.
What do you think, everyone, on how Prince Andrew was portrayed? Because I thought those images of him in his bedroom with the soft toys were so scary. Oh my God.
Creepy.
So creepy. So I don't know, Helen, what do you think?
It's interesting because it's hard to tell what is dramatised and what has kind of been gained from fictional accounts. So it's kind of interesting that we're seeing kind of the imagined behind the scenes as well, because some of it was real. So the tour that he gives her after the interview is completely real. But yeah, those kind of little moments where he's in the bath, it's a very ugly portrait of someone.
Yeah.
Whether it happened like that, we're not sure. But because he's so repulsive and so disgusting. You could imagine that happening.
It's good to have that creative license. I mean, I think that was fantastic visual imagery to have that kind of, you know, the portrait of him as he's coming out of the bath, like this saggy skin and, you know.
Oh, but come on, don't judge people on their looks. That's what my whole podcast's about.
But in relation to him having a relationship as an older man with the younger woman,
because of the creepiness of him. Yes, because you had to show the skin, because it was like he came across like that was his sexuality, you know, like you're kind of like seeing him in the bare flesh. And I just thought that was a really good visual representation to kind of see him like dripping, looking like almost like a dead body, decrepit, I think the word is I'd like to use.
Helen, how familiar were you with Sam McAlister or people who did her kind of role before you watched this film? And how much do you think it was important to portray this film from her perspective or not?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I would be interested to read her book. I wasn't a huge fan of the film, if I'm honest. I kind of got a lot more having a little bit of a dig around on Wikipedia afterwards and found out a little bit of her background, because she's a barrister, I believe. So she's got quite an interesting background. But the way she's portrayed is kind of a bit like she's just kind of like a working class mum who's just happened to have this job, where I think she would have worked a lot kind of harder to be there. So it kind of is a bit of an odd film. And I just couldn't get over her hair. Like, it just looks so crunchy. You know, when you have so much like stuff in it and it looks really crunchy. I don't know why they had to do her hair like that. I find it a little bit distracting.
I think it was the wet gel look.
Yeah, I found it massively distracting, the hair. But I would really be interested to read her book and kind of like understand a bit more about kind of what goes on, because it just kind of made everything look like we just make a few phone calls and then we get this. And it's like, is that really how it works? Like, it kind of feels like it's saying a lot, but I didn't really get that much from it. So definitely would be intrigued to find out a bit more about her through a book.
It felt to me that it seemed that she put a lot of legwork into making it happen, but also there was a degree of luck in there, which I feel must be the case with a lot of these interviews. There's different things moving into different positions that I was pleasantly surprised. I think the fact that it's her story was really interesting versus it being Gillian Anderson, Emily Maitlis' story. And I think there's a film or as a TV series on Amazon Prime which tells the same story but from Maitlis' point of view. So I've not seen that yet. I'm less interested in watching that, because I think it's how this was put together was really interesting. And then you have the interview itself at the end, which is the interview which everyone's seen. In fact, I'm not sure if I've seen it, because I'm just like, I've seen enough already. But that's not a long interview that you can just watch the final denouement. So on one hand, I'm like, this is really interesting how they've done it. The other side of things is it almost too soon to do this? I think because it is from her perspective, that's the main validity for it. The Amazon Prime one seems a bit more like, well, why are we doing this now?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'll watch the Emily Maitlis one. I mean, I think they did ham up the working class aspect to her personality, but you see, it is true that a lot of people, even though they might have the best education, you know, be like really high achievers and do incredible things, and yet they come into the BBC and they feel like an outsider. They feel out of place. They're led to question their kind of validity and their kind of what they can achieve. Like, in a way, that is part of the culture.
And I was wondering particularly now when we're talking about it, but also watching the movie, it's like they were clearly making a point on Sam's character in terms of her dress and her hair and like the non-belonging, you're kind of a mirror kind of person. I wondered if she genuinely dressed that way or if it was a way again of portraying how much she shouldn't belong.
Yeah, I had to look at some pictures of her, and she is very like glamorous, and she does have blonde curly hair, and she does dress very well. So I think it was probably over exaggerated for this, maybe for those points like you've just mentioned.
But I mean, I think it is right. Like, it's not just come out of nowhere that she did feel like that, and that she was a feeling as well. The point that she made about getting her story into the Daily Mail, not kind of just looking down on other media or the newspapers as kind of like, oh, that is almost too low class to kind of try to pander to the newspapers. The fact that she called the paparazzi photographer. I mean, the opening to this film, I think, is amazing. Like, you've taken right to the heart of that, taking that photo of Prince Andrew when he's walking through the park. That is just, the opening is just heart-stoppingly, the importance of that image of him with Jeffrey Epstein, the proof. And it comes up again in the interview with Prince Andrew that, like, oh, he had to explain himself as to why he'd gone to New York to stay in his house. You know, if that photo had not been taken, do you think that he would have said any of that?
Oh, absolutely
no,
not.
He wouldn't have said it. He wouldn't have had to answer or account for any of it. And the fact that he had to, and then that really showed up kind of the ridiculousness of what he was saying. Oh, and the way he made it out, like, oh, I had to go and see him because otherwise I would be a coward for not telling my friend face to face that I didn't want to see him again. And then to answer the question.
But then it comes about that he's already seen him.
But he wasn't his friend. Yeah, also he's like, but Ghislaine was my friend. Like, he was just
something else.
My boyfriend.
I think what's interesting is that picture was taken was in a time where mobile phones existed, but perhaps they were less anonymous. They're less kind of prevalent as they are now. When he talks about being in Pizza Express, I was like, mate, you're so lucky. Not lucky, but if that had been at a time when there were mobile phones around in a Pizza Express, there would have been evidence to prove or disprove that, I guess.
You didn't need that photo because what he was saying was so utterly ridiculous, you know. It was just like... If he'd
actually been there, it would have been in the news.
I think they get away with a lot more. I know I've seen one of my friends took a picture of Prince Harry when he was in a pergola and other places in London where it hasn't made the news because I think a lot of people just literally don't care. If it was Princess Diana or if it was like Prince Charles, I mean, there was that thing where King Charles was walking in a hill somewhere and he just walking by himself and he came across some mountain bikers, didn't he? This was like recently, not long after he became king. And that was like interesting news because like, hey, he's the king and he's walking around by himself.
But I don't think anybody would really notice Prince Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein walking through the Central Park. I mean, they're so like nondescript kind of people.
But you would notice him in Pizza Express in Woking.
But maybe it was a fully booked for the party because he was taking his daughter to a party, wasn't he?
I mean, you notice, but would you care is the question. Apart from that's Randy Andy over there.
But the fact I was going to say was that Sam called the paparazzi photographer directly, got his number. He was working for tabloid newspapers. She did. Not many BBC journalists would do that. They wouldn't cross that line.
Oh, okay.
You know, they
interesting.
Just kind of like, you know, I mean, I don't know anybody that would do that anyway, but it just good though. It was good. It showed getting that information. And I don't think that it was that unusual that a lot of in getting these kinds of big bid interviews, there is serendipity, you know, like luck is very much involved because it has to be like a play of all of these different factors that came together. And I think that the film portrayed that really well, how everything kind of just conspired to make this thing happen.
I mean, I suppose it was a balance as well, because like how the film portrays it is that there's the balance between her following a story and kind of her determination to get that in, and the luck that it all exploded when she had the entry. So it was a mix of both, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Is there anything else guys want to say before we head to the school?
Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs, but luckily there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku, and it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
What makes a great pair of glasses? At Warby Parker, it's all the invisible extras without the extra cost. Their designer quality frames start at $95, including prescription lenses, plus scratch-resistant, smudge-resistant, and anti-reflective coatings, and UV protection, and free adjustments for life. To find your next pair of glasses, sunglasses, or contact lenses, or to find the Warby Parker store nearest you, head over to warbyparker.com. That's warbyparker.com.
Imagine this. The best pasta sauce you have ever tasted sits abandoned on a plate. Wasted sauce. That is a tragedy. If only you had used Barilla al Bronzo pasta. Its bronze-cut texture holds your sauce and scoops up every last drop. The Italians call that scarpetta. Capture sauce the Italian way. Barilla al Bronzo. Click or tap the banner to find out more.
This podcast is supported by Progressive, a leader in RV insurance. RVs are for sharing adventures with family, friends, and even your pets. So if you bring your cats and dogs along for the ride, you'll want Progressive RV insurance. They protect your cats and dogs like family by offering up to $1,000 in optional coverage for vet bills in case of an RV accident, making it a great companion for the responsible pet owner who loves to travel. See Progressive's other benefits and more when you quote RV insurance at Progressive.com today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Pet injury is an additional coverage and subject to policy terms.
Pause.
So the only other point that I wanted to make was we were talking about the outsider thing. The only thing that did not ring true for me in this film was the relationship of within the newsroom. I don't know if you remember, there was a guy called Freddie who was the producer, and he was a person of colour. And then there was somebody else behind who was a researcher, and she was also from, I think she was East Asian background. So the Freddie character was quite bullish, not very kind, shall we say, to the Sam McAlister character. He was the one that was like basically rubbishing her attempt to try and get this interview and telling her to go and get Farage or whatever, right? And it didn't ring true for me, that kind of dynamic. But there's a lot of people that work who are from kind of underrepresented backgrounds that work at the BBC. There's more camaraderie than to kind of start saying, oh, we don't, that was something that I was kind of like, I felt a bit off.
And Nina, you're doing research currently on diversity in the newsroom, so very relevant to these. So what are your thoughts? Again, this was very much, there were people of colour in the background, but not in camera, were there?
Well, I mean, he did have a very key role. Like, he was like the main producer for the programme. But all the rest was really just spot on, like when they had to go and get permission from the Director General and the head of news, and they were both watching the opera, and they had to go and knock on their box to go and ask them, and then that they needed to have the final say as to whether the interview would be broadcast or not, which shows like the institutional reliance. Like, if for any reason the royal family had turned round and said to the Director General, we want to pull the plug on this interview, they would not have been allowed to run it.
Right. There's still those layers and positions in place for something like this. Is that something that's reserved for someone of stature to the royal family, or is that available to anyone who takes that kind of stance?
Stories get killed from when the word comes from higher up.
I do think it's time to test the scores, guys.
Okay.
I'm Sam Clements, host of the 90 Minutes or Less Film Festival, another podcast in the Stripped Media family, a podcast that celebrates movies under 90 minutes long. Each episode, I'm joined by a special guest who selects a movie to join our prestigious lineup. Past guests have included fellow Stripped Media family members Martin and Sam from Song by Song, and Kobe from Flixwatcher, and Dave from The Wire Stripped. Search for us now on the app you're currently listening to this podcast, or join us at 90minfilmfest.com.
Welcome to our Flixwatcher scores. All of the scores are out of 5, and we'll start with you, please, Nina R., with your recommendability.
I would give it a 4 because I would recommend it. Especially, like, say to anybody who's thinking of, working in the media or in journalism. I think it's a good kind of more realistic portrayal of British newsroom.
Is it just British newsroom, or when you see, I know everyone talks about Sex and the City, but the fact that Carrie is a column journalist and living in a fantastically luxuriant, well, it's not super luxuriant, but it's like hey, that's a nice place you're living in. How can you afford that on your journalist salary? I know things changed between the 90s and now, but it still seemed a bit far-fetched. What I thought watching this was, I didn't know Samantha's background, as in Samantha in Scoop, not Samantha in Sex and the City. I didn't know her background, but I thought I can imagine this is a bit true to life, because I've seen some of the salaries at the BBC. They don't seem that high to be able to support what we think happens in the BBC. You have outliers like Gary Lineker and Maitlis, I'm sure would have been on a very decent salary, but further down the rung, when you're not even on mic.
Say like a normal journalist salary, not senior, but a normal journalist salary is probably around like maybe 32, 35, something like that.
Okay, that's better than I thought it would be, actually. Yeah, I started on way less as an engineer. So 4 for Ninna Robinson.
I didn't know you were an engineer.
Previously. So Ninna Makrinov.
I would give it like a 4.2. I actually thought it was super fun. So not from even the very highbrow descriptions we've been having, but it felt like a bit of a thriller, and I enjoyed watching it. So just for pure entertainment value, yeah, maybe a 4.2. I would recommend it.
Helen.
I'm going to give it 2. I don't think it really gives that much away. And I think in my mind, I'm kind of comparing it to something like She Said, which is like a real kind of in-depth film into investigative journalism with kind of a lot more at stake and a lot more kind of tension building.
Just give us a one-liner to remind us what She Said is.
So that's the story of the 2 female journalists who uncovered the Harvey Weinstein abuse and brought that to light, and all of the work that went into that.
That's also on Netflix at the moment, by the way, for you.
It is, yeah. And there's just a lot kind of more like, I felt I learned a lot more about the process and how interviews are gained, and the kind of the threat of losing the story and having your sources go cold and not being able to get that, and putting all that kind of work in. And I also think that it advocates a lot more for its victims, whereas obviously this really isn't about it. It's about Sam's story, and we kind of like don't really get much from the victim's point of view. And the main reason is it feels like a TV episode. It doesn't feel like a film. And that's probably because it's directed by someone who is more familiar with TV. So I didn't find it that engaging. There were some bits that were interesting, but hearing Ninna kind of talk a little bit more in depth, I've kind of got a lot more from listening to you than I have from that. So I think you could just watch the interview and kind of get a feel from it, and maybe read Sam's book and get a bit more of an insight into some of the other stories as well, to get a bit more of that experience.
I'm going to go for a 4. I'm going to go for an exact 4. I think it surprised me and intrigued me, like you said before, because it was from Sam McAlister's perspective. It's interesting that none of us have talked about, well, apart from myself mentioning it was Emily Maitlis, who's, you know, somewhat of quite a big star in front of camera. And Gillian Anderson had quite a big role in this, right? She wasn't a wallflower in this story. So the fact that we focus on that side shows kind of the weight and importance that we have on that side of things. So, and that's why I don't think I'm interested in the other one.
She came across as quite a cold,
Maitlis,
unloving character, you know, with her dog. Like, she didn't seem to elicit much warmth from people.
One other thing to tag on from what Helen said, it's not really interested in the survivors or the victims of Epstein and
it's not that kind of journalism.
Yeah.
No, and it's not that kind of movie either. I mean, it was an entertaining movie, it felt to me, but not really trying to go deep into the analysis.
No, I feel they should include that a bit more into the story. And one thing that happened of note, I think that last week or the week before, as this goes live, was Virginia Giuffre. I can never get her name right. She died by suicide.
Yeah, Giuffre or Roberts, she's referred to.
She died by suicide recently.
Oh, I didn't know that.
She did.
Allegedly.
This is the thing, is so when the whole Jeffrey Epstein and Prince Andrew thing, she was there on every single like picture. There's that picture of her next to Prince Andrew, and then when she, you know, dies by suicide,
with his arm on, with his hand on her bare waist,
and then now she died by suicide, it was just like a little underscore somewhere. I don't even know how I saw it.
Yeah, I saw that. And when I first saw it, I was like, oh my God, conspiracy. What is going on there? How can she, you know, have just taken her own life? But then apparently she got run over, or she was involved in an accident, and it caused such kind of debilitating injury that she was in a lot of pain.
Oh, yeah, I didn't look into it. I assumed that it was And I'm sure that's what the story led me towards. That I assumed it was directly related to the pressure with being the face of
who knows?
But if there's a, Okay, so let's head over to the repeat viewing score. Ninna Robinson.
Repeat, like, would I watch it again?
Yeah, would you watch it again? How often would you watch it again? Do you think you need to watch it again? Give us a score.
Yes, I would watch it again. I'd probably watch it maybe like in a year's time, because I've got a really not a good memory. Like, I forget films really easily.
So what score would you give it from?
I will give it a 3.
You give it a 3. Ninna Makrinov.
I wouldn't watch it again, so I'd probably give it a 1. I thought it was great to watch once, but that was it. I don't think it has enough to get my attention again.
Helen.
Yeah, unsurprisingly, I'm at 1 on it as well.
I'm sorry I made you watch it.
No, it was fun.
It was worth watching. It was just, it's intrigued me about learning more about Sam and her book. I think I would definitely want to read that. I'd get more out of that, I think. I'm
going for 1 as well. I watched it and I was like, this is the second time I watched it. And I was like, this is fine. This is fine. I got 99.9% of the stuff I needed the first time. Small screen score. I feel it might pick up a few points here. Ninna Robinson.
Made for the small screen, 5.
Ninna Makrinov.
Yeah, 5 as well. I mean, it's clearly designed for that. It's a Netflix film, so they knew where it was coming. And I mean, I think you're right, Helen. It is a TV film, but I actually quite like series more than films sometimes, so hence maybe that's why I enjoyed the movie.
Helen.
Yeah, a 5 for me. It's the most made-for-TV film we've had on in a while. And I'm just going to say, like, I don't know what the budget would have been, but the budget for makeup must have been huge because they're all wearing so much makeup. Like, she surely must not wear that much makeup on Newsnight. It was just...
I didn't notice that.
Did you not? I was just like, that's just so much makeup. Like, crazy times.
I'm going 5 as well. I think more than anything, because the focus was that TV interview, I think that directed the style more than trying to make it big and bombastic. Because if the set piece is a TV interview, then what's the point of making it huge before you get to that? So, yeah.
And as you said, Helen, it was was it TV producers or directors that were working on it?
Yeah, the person who directed this, his background is mainly in TV. I don't know if they've done many other films, but Prime Suspect, The Crown.
Oh.
Okay, so when you say, because there's TV directors and there's directors, I mean, like, Fincher makes TV now, but it looks fucking amazing.
Yeah, but he's a film director who has done some TV.
But people,
a music video director turned film director turned TV director.
Yeah. There's people that flip back and forth, but yeah, this is, when you say Prime Suspect, I was like, I know what kind of TV director you mean. Engagement score, Ninna Robinson.
So was I engaged by it?
Yeah.
Not that much, because I did get interrupted and I left it and then came back to it. So 2.
Makrinov.
I quite liked it, as I said. I really enjoyed it, so I'm going to give it a 4. And I actually, one thing that we haven't talked about, and I think it was also why I was engaged, I actually like the acting as well. All of them, even Gillian Anderson, but we haven't talked about her a lot, but I think coming across as she did was good acting. And Rufus Sewell as well, like doing Prince Andrew in such a way, was good acting too. So yeah, I was super gripped.
Yeah, I've got no problem with any of the acting here. It always makes me laugh. Well, there's 2 things. So Gillian Anderson, I think she's in the best career position of her life, even though considering she was in X-Files, and that was amazing, especially back in the 90s. And I still can't think of Billie Piper without singing Honey to the Bee back from the 90s, and she's like crushing it in this and in some other films as well, and TV shows. So, Helen, sorry, engagement score.
Yeah, so I got to about maybe 10 minutes into the interview, and then I was like, oh, you know what? I'm just going to watch the actual interview. So then I switched out and watched the whole interview, and then went back to the rest of the film the other day, just because I think it's not the whole interview, but it's a lot of it, and it's very exactly as how it happened. Yeah. And it's a very weird experience. But watching the fiction of the recreation is really weird. But then when you watch the actual interview, it's even weirder. Yeah. Like, it's even worse. It's hard to imagine. It's even worse. And it's on YouTube. And there's over 50,000 comments on there. And the comments are incredible. Like, it's really a place to go to really be joined together by people's complete disbelief in, like, how he thought he was going to get away with it. And also, I think it's really interesting that, it'd be good to get your thoughts on this, that it was approved by the Queen, and whether she approved it so that it then gave her
leverage in a way,
kind of to then like take him out the limelight, because without that happening, he was just kind of like a live wire, or whether it didn't get that far to her, or even she listened to it and thought, that sounds fine, my dear. I don't know. So yeah, did Queenie approve it?
I mean, in the film, they said that she said to Andrew, "Oh, I trust you, whatever you want, you feel that you should do," which seemed completely plausible to me. I mean, I don't think that she's going to be that, like, strategically minded to start thinking, oh, I want to take Andrew out and this is the best way to do it. I mean, I doubt very much that there'd be that much kind of...
I'd love it if there was that kind of like posturing and positioning, like, well, let him do the interview and he'll be less of a headache, because after that he was literally like removed from the limelight, which
the next day.
But then, if I'm thinking when producer, if you're saying the same producer of The Crown, it kind of sounds very much like The Crown kind of thing, where I'm starting to wonder, is it because she was open to doing this because there's other things behind? But actually, it's a lot of that is made up. So I don't know.
Oh, when you said it, because I've never seen The Crown. So you said in The Crown, she's quite...
Oh, I like it. I mean, the first seasons, but after that, it becomes a bit boring. But yeah, there's a lot of a kind of assumption of things that happen behind doors that don't really happen. So I wonder if that was there as well.
So I'm quite interested in your engagement score, Helen, because you stopped it towards the interview, but then you came back afterwards. 3, okay.
Oh, that was higher than I expected you were going to give it.
I thought it was going to be a bit higher because you were like...
I know, it's higher than me. Maybe I should readjust mine.
Engagement score, 3.51. 3.51. And that gives an overall score of 3.29438.
That's still pretty good. Yeah, even with my score.
Repeat viewing score massively let it down. A small screen score, 5s across the board, which massively buoyed it. So yeah, thank you very much, Ninna Makrinov and Nina Robinson. Could you say a quick hello, goodbye to everyone and say where they can find you online?
Goodbye. You can find me on Instagram at Soundtruism. Follow me there.
Goodbye. And you can find me on loads of social media at the Fat Psychologist. So Instagram, Facebook, Blue Sky. I just discovered it. It's brilliant.
You've just discovered it?
Oh, yeah. I'm hopeless. But I thought, this makes so much more sense than being on the annoying people's ones. And also my website, thefatpsychologist.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks for coming on.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
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 Enjoyed this episode of Flixwatcher podcast? Why not leave us a 5-star review on iTunes? You can also follow us at FlixWatcherPod on Twitter, and we're at FlixWatcher on Instagram. Thanks as always to the mighty people for their mighty, mighty tunes, and Rockwood Audio's editing skills. If you're looking to get your podcast edited as sweet as this, get in touch with Rockwood, ROKK Wood Audio. Tell them Flixwatcher sent you.
You just heard a Stripped Media production.